Public comments. Members of the public are invited to address the authority regarding any item that's not on the agenda. Is there any comments? If you need to speak, please fill out a speaker card. We move into item 1.1, regular agenda items. Okay, we're going to have quite a few. Okay, we'll go to public comments on that. Okay, we'll discuss initial draft transportation expenditure plan, project, and category funding amounts. And I think we'll move on with Don Tatson.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. So referencing back to the last item that Mr. Hill presented regarding the largest consulting contract the authority has ever issued, I think I may have the distinction of having the smallest consulting contract the authority has ever issued. But it's a pleasure to be here. So this is our third weekly meeting in June. And so it really provides us with a great opportunity to remember where we've come from, to assess where we are, and to understand how much further we have to go. Remember, our goal is to create a measure that will be supported by at least 2/3 of our voters. And that's going to be an impressive achievement when all of you make it happen. Our path for getting there is not easy, and there is little room for error. So let me go back to one of the survey slides that we saw in May. This is about the final slide, and it looked at the two methods of asking the ballot question, one a traditional ballot question and one an outcomes ballot question. And it talked about the share that said yes when we read the ballot question at the beginning of the survey, after we had given them positive measure information, and then after we had given them some negative information about the taxes that are out there. And you will see that the traditional ballot question does not get to 2/3. And the outcomes-focused ballot question, which is what we're working on, is still at 70%. You can't make many errors and win with that kind of survey. And that's a lot about what we're going to talk about tonight is how do we walk that path that gets us to 2/3 approval. There's another slide, or another set of answers in the sub-regional analysis, which they didn't go into in much detail, and they did a little bit in summary. People were asked whether particular features of the measure would make them much more likely to vote for it. And it's interesting, one thing got the top share in every region. And let me read what the question was, because I think it's important for how we structure the measure. The statement that was read to them was said, "This measure will make our elected officials accountable for how they spend our tax money by requiring proof that anything that is funded with the revenue will make a real impact on congestion in Contra Costa County. They will not be allowed to spend any money on things that don't make our commutes faster and more predictable." So while other things did well, and we asked probably about 15 or 20 things, it's interesting that these 11 had the top 10 places in each region. So there wasn't that much variance. So I think the message is structure most of the measure, are particularly around the first item, accountability for reducing congestion and making commutes faster and more predictable, and then achieve it through these subsequent items. Now, when we came to you in June with the first, there's another question I want to summarize. We asked another question, which is, do you think it's better that the money be focused on a smaller number of big projects or big activities, or spread around, like putting butter on all of the toast? And the answer was pretty much focus it on a smaller number of bigger activities. So that's something else we ought to think about. So when we brought to you the first draft expenditure plan that we had put together by listening to people, we said that one of the big changes compared to what we've done historically is that the share that went to transit and alternative modes to the personal vehicle had risen to 50% if you excluded the administration and planning money. And that was a significant increase. we've been out getting comments. And so, in summary, tonight's going to be the opportunity for the authority to take the lead and specify what's submitted for public comment in the June draft. We're listening intently, you are listening intently, and it should come as no surprise to any of us that some of the responses we're getting just a mere 2 weeks after we put this first draft up is, how can I make this better for my organization? Not so much in all cases, how can I make comments that are going to make this pass among voters countywide? It's our job to make that transition. So, but that being said, I'm glad to tell you that the gaps between the comments are narrowing, and they're doing so daily. But the requests are still at odds, and we cannot present tonight an amalgam of all the comments we've heard that would form a coherent TEP expenditure plan and set of policies. Therefore, what we're going to show you tonight is insight into what we've heard and our recommendation for what gets distributed in the version that goes out in late June or early July. And that's not going to be ready for distribution tonight because we haven't incorporated all the comments we've received to date, plus all the ones that you'll give us this evening. So we're going to recommend there either be another full review by the authority or that the chair appoint an ad hoc committee to go over the final version. That goes out for review. So there are two, give me the wrong slide here. You recall that in the staff recommendation, we wanted to move more towards transit aggressively, to channel funds to non-single occupancy vehicle uses by better transit, ferries, transit lane extensions, BART, et cetera. And then last week, you approved modeling to test whether these features will have a real impact on congestion. There are two major topics we want to cover tonight in discussing the expenditure plan, and I think one of your attachments is the latest version we have, and there are probably changes on that since then. So let me discuss return to source funds. Our June 5th proposal was an average of 15.2%, split 12% through 2034 and 18% thereafter. Here's a summary slide of the positions by the RTPCs regarding that recommendation. SWAT has not made a decision. Members from SWAT can talk about where they are, and there's a letter in your packet. WCTAC endorsed the 15% position. Neither TransPAC nor TransPlan has endorsed the position, and a collection of environmental and community groups that we've been speaking with sent a letter in yesterday that you should have in your packet that recommends 15% and designates one third of that for incentives for affordable housing near transit. So there's not a, in addition, the Public Managers Association has appointed a committee to review this topic, and staff will attend the Public Managers Association July meeting to discuss funding for local governments. We agree that funding for local roads is important, and you will note that in that slide where I listed all those things, it showed up pretty high. However, in our view, it's 15% is essentially the right number for this round of an expenditure plan. But let me go through some of what we've heard from others. So here's what we heard from SWAT. So they wanted the Caldecott funding measure to be split with another RTPC, just as was done for the Caldecott Tunnel. That's $5 million total. And of course, they want there to be matching funds appropriately. They wanted to clarify some of the distribution for how the convenient and reliable transit category is allocated. We can do that easily. They want to increase funding for fixed modernized local roads, which is the return to source category. They want that the other category, improved traffic flow on local streets, should have a return to source benefit to SWAT. It's already been allocated to all the subregions, and there is no intent to move money from one subregion to another. So I think that's something we can work out fairly easily. They need clarification, as we all do, about how East Bay Regional Park District will spend the $38 million that's been allocated to them. That's a fair request and one we have to work on. And they're going to put Tim on the spot in a minute to provide a rationale for the change in administrative and planning costs in the proposal. In WICTAC, they wanted to combine BART funding into one category, I think, and that's fine. We'll leave the multiple categories and put their funding into one. They would like us to study a BART extension to San Pablo and North Richmond, and I think there's money in a BART access category to do that. They wanted to move San Pablo Avenue transit improvements to another category. They wanted additional funding for increasing bus service reliability and improved biking and walking. They also wanted to put Tim on the spot and talk about CCTA administration and planning dollars. And they took money out of improving traffic flow on local streets, and they took some money out of decreasing safe transportation for youth because they know what they want to do, and they have a price for it. So they've come back to us with a plan that moves money around and balances it within their regional total. Those are the most complete letters we've gotten. We've received the letter from the community groups today. They want us to do more meaningful community engagement than they thought we were going to. I think will pleasantly surprise them. They want us to be committed to performance-oriented and outcomes-focused programs and projects, and we're going to be talking about in the policy area some suggestions for helping to do that. They want to make sure that the TEP significantly reduces greenhouse gases and vehicle miles traveled. And again, in the policy area, we have some performance evaluation procedures. We'd like you to consider that should do that, recognizing that because the county is supposed to grow, probably the proper measure for us is to do that on a per capita basis. They're looking us to prioritize social equity and improve transportation options for all. They're looking to protect and strengthen the urban limit line and protection for open space. You'll recall that the Measure X provisions do exactly that. Whether that is going to be sufficient, we don't know yet. And they're asking that we commit 6% of all infrastructure funds to regional advanced mitigation. And again, I think staff is working on what they believe is the right number, which doesn't say 6% isn't. We just don't have a response yet. So again, what we're recommending you authorize this evening is that for this next draft, that we put in 15%, because we should have a number. That we continue to work with the RTPCs and the Public Managers Association, and that we seek additional input from various stakeholders. Now, another category is this whole issue of how much money gets allocated to alternatives to the personal vehicle and how much is allocated to transit. So recall that this is the slide I showed a little while ago. That was roughly a 50-50 split if you took the non-transit, non-planning money. If you look at what WICTAC did, that increased. That increased the allocation to about 51 to 52%. So again, I think one of the things that the authority may want to send as a guideline is that you would like to achieve, I would suggest you'd shoot for something a little over 50 as an overall allocation, given that you've got, in WICTAC's case, their numbers came out to be about 75% for alternatives to personal vehicles. All right, so another thing that's come up in the last week was a new idea that was brought to us by, it relates to BART, it was brought to us by, not by BART, but by somebody else. But going back to BART, early on we had a meeting with BART, I think it was in May, and they provided us with a list of things that we might consider investing in. One of those was additional BART cars so that they could operate more frequencies on our two lines. And we did not put that in because it was going to take BART roughly 10 years to get the train control system in place, and we didn't know they'd ever do that. But as a result of that, we cannot say with this measure that we can increase BART frequencies. And BART frequencies could be a useful feature. So what we're going to propose is that as part of the periodic 10-year review process, that we essentially say that that could be considered, assuming BART meets certain conditions, such that they could use the cars at that point, that they have a train control system in place that could allow them to add frequencies to the Contra Costa lines, that there is matching funds from other counties to do this regionally, so we're not doing the only one. But that's a request for you to consider about allowing us to start drafting language in that direction. And then the other category is, we've been through a couple of rounds in the expenditure plan of thinking about how should we express the major categories. Go back to that question in the survey which said, we'd rather have you spend more of the money on a smaller number of things and spread it around thinly. And we've tried to do that, but we still have about 4 or 5 categories, and I think we've all had opinions that they're not as punchy and obvious as they need to be. So what we would like is just concurrence that we can go back and think about how to not necessarily change what the money is spent on, but change how we describe it. So if I go back, so here is another category. So it's I-80 congestion relief, and that means you do a few things to the road, but mostly what you're doing is creating incentives for people to ride buses and take BART or whatever, so that they're not on the road, and you reduce the number of automobile trips that way. Do the same thing on 680 and 24. Do the same thing on 242 and 4. More of a marketing message of essentially moving East County, whether that be the categories of additional BART cars, the transit extension to Brentwood, local access to Highway 4 and Byron Airport. So, again, we can all put on our thinking caps as to what the right way is to express the big areas in our region, but what we're trying to do is solve the problem we neatly solved in Measure J, where we could just say Caldecott Tunnel, and people knew what it was. So we want things that people can easily say, oh yeah, they're going to make my life on 680 better, or my life on Highway 80 better, or whatever.
Don, can I stop you a minute right there? Going back to that list, one of the things that I thought was a cheap way of getting engagement were the words you just said. All you had to say was Caldecott Tunnel, but it's not up there, and we are talking about using it.
Well, Caldecott Tunnel fits in very nicely to our reputation as being able to do what we say we're going to do. It's done. Yeah. But thank you. But keep thinking. You'll have the, Yes.
So I just wanted to add something. So something that was really apparent to me at SWAT yesterday was, as we were kind of reviewing the expenditure plan with the committee, we got to, improve transit reliability along Interstate 680 State Route 24 corridor, and it was like, wait a second, there's only 50 million. Where's the other 200 million? And so you have to go further, deeper into the expenditure plan to go find the 200 million. So, what we thought was a good idea of bundling things up by transit has kind of deterred the actual goal of actually saying these are all the projects that are going to provide you 680 congestion relief. And so it was very apparent to me that people were starting to hunt and find, and that the message wasn't coming across.
And so the final thing that we want to cover in our discussion of the expenditure plan is the planning and administration funds, and I'm going to craftily duck and turn this conversation over to Tim.
Very graciously done, Don. So we have been doing some analysis on the transportation planning facility services category, both in Measure C, Measure J, and trying to understand, the reasons why, Measure X was reduced from 3% to 1.5% and 1% to 0.5%. And so what I wanted to kind of just discuss is these are the things that this particular category funds at our agency. And we do a lot of things in transportation planning. We implement the growth management plan. We develop and implement the countywide transportation plan. We've just started implementing the countywide bicycle pedestrian plan. And then we're also working with all of our partners, as well as our state and federal partners in terms of programming and funding. And then the facilities and services, that's essentially the dollars to keep this building and the lights on. And then one of the other things is MTC, there's more things coming out of MTC for CMAs to do. And so there's more reporting, and the Bay Area 2050 RTP has priority production areas now, on top of what we're already doing for PDAs and priority transit areas. And then the other thing this category does is it does all of our regional planning. And so if Richmond wants us to study an extension of BART to San Pablo, this is where those dollars would come from. It also gives us the ability to really study the county as a whole in terms of what are those transportation needs and what do we need in the future to really prepare Contra Costa for the future of transportation. And then the other thing I think that's pretty important is that in both Measure X, the 2016 TEP, and also, and we'll talk about it more in the next item, but the 2020 TEP has a number of policies in there. In terms of developing the Public Advisory Committee, as well as all the taxpayer safeguards, the Advanced Mitigation Program, the Complete Streets Policy, which has additional checklists and so forth for the Growth Management Plan. We're also adding new policies like the Transit Policy and developing an integrated transit plan, as well as all of the associated implementation guidelines with all of the various funding categories in the plan. And so all of that in terms of is going to add additional work for the authority staff and consultants that support us. And so we did an analysis of kind of what we've been spending in terms of this category. And over the last 11 years, on average, we spend about $2.4 million per year in this category. And so when you start looking at how is Measure C and Measure J were actually overlapped, we actually expended all of those funds, even though there was an overlap between Measure C and Measure J. And so that dollar amount is approximately about 2.7% of what a $3 billion measure would be. And then you also heard in the previous meeting, the previous item for the annual budget, in terms of administration costs, that 1% cap, we track right now at 0.8%. For administration for the authority, and that doesn't include, maybe we do hire someone in the future, or maybe we, have more consultants, et cetera. So right now what we're proposing in the 2020 TEP is 3% for transportation planning, facility services, and 1% for administration. And I just want to give a picture for the authority board of the reasonings why staff was actually recommending 3% and 1%. And I also would note that it's also consistent with Measure J funding that we've been historically tracking at 2.7%. So that's.
Did you have something?
Oh, I didn't want to really interrupt, but if you really look at our budget, and how do I say this correctly, we have to allocate his time, and all of our other staff to other specific themes to stay under that. This is realistic. I mean, we've been playing this game to try to say we're meeting our standards, but in fact, we have to show, well, this person's going to work on this, so we're going to call that project time, and they do that. This gives us the ability to do what we are. It's what we did in Measure J. I mean, from my seat, you don't have to sell me. We should have done this. It was unrealistic in Measure X to be able to do that. And going forward, we have to redo this plan every 10 years, right? Whatever everybody wants to say to get this thing passed, it's actually going to be done in 10 years, and 10 years again. We need the staff to do that, and I would rather have more staff to do that and not go out and hire our consultants under these huge contracts. Our agency into this is going to be around a long time, that I think we could do a better job on that. So I just want to support it. I think it's the right thing. And I know you're trying to sell it, Tim. You sold me already. It's the right thing to do.
So in essence, it just makes us more transparent. I mean, we're not playing game. We're not shuffling things around. Here's what you're getting, and this is what you're paying for, and this is what you're getting for what you pay for. So echoing in on Newell's comments, I'm sold. I think we're done.
Thank you. So to summarize, we would like authority, input, and direction tonight so that we can put together the next draft of the plan. What return to source level should we include, which doesn't mean it's your final decision, but we need direction for what the next draft has. What share of funding you want us to indicate would go to alternative transportation modes. It's, right now it's hovering at 51.6%, given that we haven't gotten final numbers from 3 of the RTPCs. Whether you want us to pursue this strategy for creating signature projects out of the expenditure plan we have, whether you want us to work on language that would allow a future authority to consider funding new BART cars to increase frequencies, and I think you've just given us direction on planning and administration funds. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. And
You want answers now?
I don't know, you might want to listen to public comment first.
I want to hear public comments. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Could I ask this is a question not related to Don, to Mala, and this goes back to a question on sales tax measure caps. Some of the cities that we have, this would exceed the cap. How does that work? Is this creating an exemption to them?
So we have special legislation that runs through December of 2020 that allows us to adopt this and exceed the cap.
Okay, but even though some cities
Even though some cities are already,
will always be under it with this, but those that are over it are okay.
correct.
Can I
It just-
refer
I
you
just
to
wanna
a
make sure.
document? I know you missed last week's meeting, but she did an excellent
Just want to make sure.
description. It's,
Okay.
it's all in there.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move into public comments before we get back in discussion with the board here. First speaker card, and would like to put, 5 minutes? You want 3? Okay, that's why I'm asking the board. You have 3 minutes. All right, first speaker would be Karen Stepper.
Thank you. I always vote for 3, too. So, Karen Stepper, I was on the Measure J Expenditure Plan Committee, the original one, and I've served on this committee and have a great deal of respect for all the people that are sitting around the table, especially including Don. So, I'm come here because I've been in 5 meetings since last Friday, the alternate to Renee Morgan on the SWAT committee, and wanted to explain to you why we still had too many 2BDs in our column for what we're doing. A major partner in, we know that La Miranda had already had a meeting, but San Ramon wasn't able to attend from the elected standpoint yesterday, and they're a major partner in our agreement on where we're going. And so I wanted to show you that we are committed to crafting a successful measure here, and that we will do that as soon as possible. Right now, we have a July 8th meeting set, but maybe we'll have to set it sooner based on what I'm hearing here this evening. We certainly agree on those great big visuals. I think Amy said it very well when she said the knot. If I had my puppies here with their rope, you would see a visual for the knot that we're trying to undo at 680. It's very much an important part of Danville, the 680-24, but also the one, I actually have my CPA office in San Ramon. Of course, I live in Danville, and I can't tell you how bad that is every day. So those 2 bottlenecks are definitely the things that our voters are looking for, but we also are looking for the regional equity that has been promised here and has always been a vital part of this, of the measures that have passed here, including C and J. So there may be some regional differences, and that's what we were struggling with yesterday, but we are certainly committed to craft a successful measure and to be a partner in this. So thank you very much.
Ryan, AC Transit. Ryan Lau.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ryan Lau, External Affairs Representative, here with some comments from AC Transit. At AC Transit, our General Manager has made it clear that our agency's focus should be on service and making investments into our system that improves the service that we offer in order to enhance the experience for existing riders and also attract new riders. Often, growing ridership requires improving service. This is well documented that growing ridership hinges upon improving bus service. We at AC Transit have firsthand experience. When we were expanding our hours of service and increasing frequency in Alameda County through our AC Go service expansion plan, we saw a substantial increase in ridership. Actually, 9.5% increase last month and over 5% increase over the past 12 months. This service expansion plan was only made possible by funding from Alameda County's Measure BB. Additionally, MTC's wise investment in trans-based service made possible by RM2 and RM3 has resulted in over 25% ridership increase in the past 5 years. If we want to make a dent in congestion and take more people out of their cars and getting them into transit now, it can only be done by an investment in bus service, which is why WICTAC made the increased bus service and reliability in West Contra Costa category a major priority in the West County TEP allocation. We encourage this board to follow WICTAC's lead and allocate 25%, the 25% that they're requesting for bus service improvements. Additionally, investing in transit supportive infrastructure is crucially important in this equation. The only way to make transit more frequent and reliable is to make sure that they're not stuck in traffic. As I-80 is the most congested freeway in the Bay Area, we really need to make it a realistic alternative by investing in transit priority through transit lanes and bolstering express bus service. The improved transit reliability along the Interstate 80 corridor category must be adequately funded if we're hoping to reduce I-80 congestion. AC Transit looks forward to continuing to work with CCTA, WICTAC, other transit operators, Contra Costa County, cities, bike and environmental groups to increase transit funding, improve transit service, and ultimately reduce congestion in Contra Costa County. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bruce Olson, Delta Peddlers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I am Bruce Olson, representing the Delta Peddlers Bicycle Club of East County. I rode my bicycle to this meeting tonight from Pittsburgh. It's kind of windy out there, but I made it. I would suggest to Mayor Bob, the next time you go to Washington, D.C., take a bicycle. Then you'll be able to keep up with Randy.
You know how to ride a bike?
The worst thing that we have done as a culture is to plan our cities around using the single occupant vehicle as personal transportation. Theorists and statisticians know that if you graph the increase of cars and car trips against the increase of vehicle lane mile construction, these two lines are on a collision course. Gridlock will be the inevitable result when these two lines cross. Given the expense and lead time involved in the construction of additional lane miles for automobiles, we are never going to catch up. Well, wait a minute. We might catch up when the ice caps melt. In reality, the best thing that we can do is to provide alternatives: BART, buses, and bikes. So what exactly do the bicyclists that I represent want from the TEP? First, let me tell you what we'd like. We'd like 10% of the total TEP funds to be dedicated to bicycling as an alternative to the automobile. That includes electric bikes and scooters, the whole shebang. The Delta Peddlers feels that we need that much out in the suburbs because we have dedicated so much of our infrastructure construction so far to the automobile. But at minimum, we want to keep the same percentages that we've had in previous tax measures dedicated to bicycles. Please do not reduce. Now, that's what we would like. What do we want? We want a good faith promise to build out the low-stress bicycle network expediently. This $1 billion bicycle and pedestrian plan that the CCTA adopted just last year, so it's current, is what we want. We don't want money figures. We don't want dates. We want just a good faith promise. We also want a seat on this board for a member of our Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. 2 more sentences?
Fast.
Fast. Hey, I'm quick.
Okay.
Just like you'll be when you get your bike.
Okay.
This citizen member of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee will keep an eye on you guys while fulfilling this promise. Thank you very much.
All right. Sean Dugan, East Bay Regional Park.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I'm Sean Dugan. I'm the Trails Development Program Manager at the East Bay Regional Park District. And as you know, we are the agency that's expanding the trail network, the active transportation network, the network within the network, and we're also maintaining it in Contra Costa County. And I want to thank you all for the support over the last measures that have come through. There's no other agency in Contra Costa, but really in our district, that's supporting us more through the funding. And for the maintenance funding, it's crucial. We depend on it. I was a part of the Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee for 2016. Unfortunately, that did not pass, but the Park District did support those numbers in that measure, and we view those as a starting point for this next measure, and we're willing to support this measure moving forward with those percentages for the bicycle, pedestrian, trail funding, and the maintenance funding that comes directly to the Park District. Of course, it's never enough. You're going to hear that from everybody. But this money has been crucial for us for leveraging our bond measure as well as the grant funding that comes in from federal, state, and local grants agencies. We've received $49.7 million since the year 2000 from transportation agencies. So this network is viewed as a legitimate transportation network. And we couldn't have done it without the money that comes from this agency to leverage those funds. Major projects that we're looking at for this in the next 20 years is completing the Iron Horse Trail from where it ends up to the Benicia Bridge and get to another county, and eventually to the other county down there, Alameda. We want to complete the Bay Trail. That's actually within our grasp within the next 20 years. There's one segment from Rodeo to Oakland. You'll be able to go 30 miles if we can complete that. We're very close to completing the Marsh Creek Trail. For the maintenance funding, we don't have any trouble spending that money. Right now, we have about 90 miles of paved trail in Contra Costa County. We have an operating budget of about $1 million. It takes us about $1 million to fund that, to make sure that pavement stays smooth. We receive about $500,000 from the 1/3 that comes off the top of Measure J right now per year, and we spread that out, $500,000 per sub-region. And this system is growing in length and popularity, so it's never been more important. This maintenance funding, we rely on it to maintain the trail system. There's been a 40% increase in trips taken since 2011 on our trail system. A public opinion poll that we held in 2015, 97% of the recipients or the respondents said that the network was an important public resource, and that 98% of them, despite shortage of funding, that it must be maintained properly. Again, the system reduces GHGs. We think it provides congestion relief, last mile connections, and it's an alternative. We think that appeals to voters, and we're willing to support this next measure with those numbers. Last I looked, there's no one else building the system and maintaining it, and there's no other agency supporting us like you. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. She wants to ask a question. Julie.
I would just like to have a copy of your information there and wherever your statistics came from. We've been asked about what does that mean? What would East Bay Regional Parks do with the money? If you could give us that to us in writing, that would be very helpful.
Great. Should I
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
Sorry, I won't mispronounce your name. I'll call Greenbelt Alliance and you can give us your name. And I apologize in advance, but
No, it's fine. I thought about it and I said, you know what, probably not going to be able to say my name, so I'm glad I put down my organization. My name's Anissa Awad, and for those of you who don't know what Greenbelt Alliance is, we're a 60-year-old regional organization that deals with the 9 counties in the Bay and San Francisco, working on protecting green space and ag land, as well as securing smart growth, and we're very concerned with how the East Bay grows. So I'm also a Contra Costa County resident, and I'm also here with my coalition of partners with Transform, Bike East Bay, and other local grassroots climate change partners. So initially in 2016, we did not support or oppose the Measure X, but with this new bill, with the new TEP, we are also not very excited about it because it's not significantly different than Measure X. The way funding is allocated, and it has been talked about in the meeting, but we're definitely more focused on public transportation than congestion relief and focusing on single occupancy vehicles. It does not work to greatly reduce greenhouse gases and VMTs in the way that our community needs for a sustainable and healthy future for our citizens. It's hard for us to take a different stance than last time unless radical changes are made to the way that funding is allocated for public transportation and a focus on biking, pedestrians, and alternative methods of transportation. We ask that you ensure an affordable, safe, sustainable, convenient, and healthy transportation system for the Contra Costa County. Thank you.
thank you. Bike East Bay, Dave Campbell.
Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay. I do first want to thank staff and Don for all your hard work. The leadership is great, and the engagement has been much better than it was 2-3 years ago. So thank you for that. Referring to the slide where the staff is asking for your input, here's mine on that slide. Return to source. We support the 15% that staff is putting out there, and I'll talk a little bit more about why on that. The second item, the percentage of funding for non-single occupancy car road projects, if you will, we would like to see it higher. We're seeing counties throughout the Bay Area and beyond even go all the way up to 100%, not $1 to move one more single occupancy car. I'm not saying Contra Costa is ready for that yet. I hope they will be within my lifetime. But that's what counties out there are doing. And so West County is at 75%. Thank you, Mayor Butt, for your leadership on that. And just an idea, if the other 3 areas go to 55% for non-single occupancy projects, overall we're at 60%. That's a good solid number, and you're starting to be comparable to other counties throughout the state. So I think that would be admirable. Just an idea. I guess my main point, though, is you don't even really need to haggle about all that. I like this idea of signature projects, and I remember the Caldecott Tunnel sold well. I remember history here. And so staff can come together with 3 or 4 signature projects. You can call them the freeway projects if you want. It's the 680 project, it's the 80 project, whatever. They are what they are. We'll let the marketing team come up with the names. And you can even take the 10% that staff is proposing for bike ped projects and hold my bike ped funding accountable to improving the commutes on those corridors. I will put my money up to that test. I may end up getting slightly less beneficial walking and biking projects overall, but I get a measure that the voters will approve. So how do I say this? 100% of less is more than, Amy told me this the other day, 100% of less is more than 0% of more, something like that. I don't want to have to do this a third time. So let staff come up with those signature projects, and everything has to meet the test. It's not just some things have to meet this test, everything. If some city says, we want 23% for local streets and roads, tell us how that is going to reduce single occupancy driving on our freeway corridors. Hold them to the test, and let's see where the cards may fall. Staff may have more work to do in the next month or so to come up with that plan. But conceptually, I'm on board with that, with all of the money. And thank you for the 10% for bike pads where we're at.
Marty Roach?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about the TEP. Thank you all for your service, and I can tell that a lot of hard work is going into this plan. I've lived in Moraga and in the county for 25 years now. I come tonight as a community volunteer. I'm involved with a number of civic groups. I have a professional background in designing community engagement projects. And I also come here as a mother who's concerned about the climate crisis and the fact that we really have a limited amount of time to get on top of that crisis. I want to quickly mention that I'm active with the League of Women Voters, and their board just did pass a resolution to submit a letter on the TEP. It's going to be quite similar and complementary to the letter that you just received from the local environmental and NGO groups. I was really happy the League came forward with that. I know we did not support the last measure. 2 points I want to emphasize tonight. For time, I'll be brief on one. I love that you said you're going to do more community engagement. We need more time for input on this. This is a fast process. But I really want to speak to the substance of the TEP and what is the transportation system of the future that we're going towards? And how do we align our transportation expenditures to our California state goals around reducing transportation greenhouse gas emissions? The 2016 sales tax initiative failed to address this point, and people I know did not vote for it for that reason. And I know this isn't an easy transition. I want us to be bold in investing in transportation solutions that meet these sustainability requirements, but also bring us healthier air and bring us more active living and better health. And I think if you surveyed residents of our county as to whether they want a transportation system that helps them be healthier, that addresses climate change, and that brings ease to their commute, they would go, hey, yeah. And so there's strong sentiment in our county for addressing sustainable solutions and reducing vehicle miles traveled. And I just quickly want to quote on survey data from the Yale Center on Climate Change Communication. It's a survey research institute that does attitude surveys on climate change all over the country. They drill down to the zip code and the county level. And their 2018 survey in our county, and mind you, this is before our fires, which moved, I think, more people to grapple with the dots between climate impacts and how we're living. They found in spring of 2018 that 70% of our Contra Costa residents worry about global warming. 61% of our Contra Costa residents think local government is not doing enough to address global warming. And surprisingly, 76% believe that environmental protection is more important than economic growth. That's kind of a zap. And to this last point, we've seen that reducing greenhouse gas emissions does not have to have negative economic harm, although it can shake up business as usual. And that's the rub that we have to overcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Orcutt, East Bay Leadership.
Hi, my name is Mark Orcutt. I'm the Communications Director at the East Bay Leadership Council, an employer-led advocacy organization with 82 years of history in our community. I just wanted to first off thank CCTA commissioners and staff, and I hope that the recent focus groups that we held with some employers and our members were helpful in informing ways that future infrastructure investments can help move people and goods efficiently and help create jobs here in Contra Costa County. And while we wish we could define exactly what is in this measure and what we would get, we understand the number one priority must be to win voter approval when we go before them. But we stand ready to continue working with you, and we'll continue to provide our feedback through the August deadline. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's my last speaker card, so if anyone else wishes to speak, please fill a card out. Chris Lepe.
Good evening. First off, so Chris Lepe with Transform. I want to first off thank staff for engaging with us in our emerging coalition around the TEP. We're encouraged by several elements of what we're seeing in the draft so far, including the land use and the housing component, which I think is really admirable, and we have some ideas in terms of strengthening the good jobs piece and also the regional ramp open space protection component. We're looking forward to working with staff, with you, the board, and also, of course, with the community through this constrained timeline here to try to ensure that there's much community involvement and engagement, in particular of low-income communities of color. In terms of areas that I think it's already been pointed out that we'd like to see some modifications is the percentage allocation for transit. I happen to live in San Jose, California. I think I've heard a lot about the auto orientation of Contra Costa County, and Contra Costa County voters couldn't possibly vote for more money for transit. I'll tell you what, Santa Clara County is their mode share for public transportation use is 4.5%. So you guys are actually doing quite well as compared to Santa Clara County, but they've passed back in 2000 and 2008 to 100% transit-only sales taxes. So I think the voters, based on the survey data that you have, fully support public transit and other options to get people out of their cars, right? If you ask most people, I think most people want fewer cars on the road, not more cars on the road. I think we can all agree on that. The second piece is, we like the direction of where the performance and outcomes-oriented component of the measure is going. We also have some ideas based on other counties, including San Mateo, where this could be evolved. We have some input there. Climate, we also like some of the language in there. It'd be, if you really want to secure the support of the environmental and climate community, let's put a clause in there that says we shall not invest in projects that actually increase greenhouse gas emissions. Having a floor and then having a competitive process that really, selects those projects that gets us in the greater direction towards climate and other co-benefits would be really admirable. And the last thing I'll say is on the equity front. This is a regressive sales tax measure, so it's important that the benefits of the measure disproportionately benefit low-income communities and communities of color. So each one of you in your respective districts in each part of the county has people in need, people in desperate need, people at the fringe, people that are about to be displaced. We got to focus on those folks and making sure that this sales tax benefits them. Thank you.
Thank you. No other speakers. Back to the board. Go, Don.
Well, again, I think this is the areas in front of you on the slide are the areas where we would like some direction so we can put together the next version that will go out for public comment. Probably after this, there wouldn't be any major changes until almost August. Yeah.
Kevin.
Okay, I'll start off by going through your list right there. Return to source, I would keep it 15. Right now, I think, although this is rather contentious, obviously, right now I think more than half the communities out there would support 15% going as return to source. That might be a little shaky, but over half. So right now it might be, we got 19 cities, it might be 10-9 or 11-8. I think we're somewhere in that category. Total funding for community alternative transportation, let's keep it above 50%. Strategy for signature projects and categories. If you go back to your list of projects where you had I-80 congestion relief, I-680 congestion relief. To avoid having to go through this, and look at, all the purple ones, mauve or whatever that color is, everyone's going to vote on it based on what's best for their community. I mean, we would love to say that everyone is going to look at this and say, gee, what's great for Contra Costa? But I think the majority of people that will look at this are going to say, how's this going to benefit me and how's this going to benefit what surrounds me? And so the way we have it laid out right now is you have to go line by line looking through this thing to see how it adjusts to you. But if we take those four categories you just have there, I-80, I-680, 24-4, and Movies County, and use those as your purple mauve headers, and then take all the projects that are related to I-80 congestion relief, whether it's increased ferry service or whatever we're going to do that's going to relieve congestion on I-80, and list all the projects under that for I-80 for someone from West County who wants to know how this is going to impact them. They're going to be able to find everything, all the projects that are out there, programs that are out there. They're going to be able to find them easier, and it'll be a little bit easier for people to read rather than having to hunt through the whole document looking for specific projects and programs that may relate to them. And I think we could clean this up a little bit and make it easier to read and hopefully create a better understanding with the public. I liked your ideas of future cutting of the BART cars. Let's come back in 10 years. We might put something in there, maybe even 15 years, and say, well, this is based on effort by BART in improving their system and their computer systems, and excuse me. And when they reach that, we will look at that into funding additional BART cars to help with congestion, and I think we've addressed the planning and administration funding on this part.
Tom.
First of all, regarding return to source, I understand that there are a group of city managers, I'm not sure how many or who, but who are pushing for a 23% return to source. And I don't know how strong that movement is or where it's going to go, but it's probably worth throwing it out there. The second thing is that I think, like the last measure, I find myself philosophically conflicted, but I think I see the path that we need to go. I agree with pretty much all the speakers tonight about where they think we ought to be going. I agree with most of the statements that are in this letter that's in our packet from 13 environmental organizations. So I kind of see two measures out there. If we were going to design a measure, I see one measure that's the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, the measure that is best for our kids and our grandkids. And then I see a measure that's going to pass. And they're not the same measure. They're like two columns. And somehow we've got to reconcile those, and we've got to pass, because some of anything is better than all of nothing. And for me, that's the really big conflict. I mean, if I were designing this, I would not put a nickel in a freeway. But I look at, pull up the slide before that, please, Don. No, or after maybe, the one that says I-80 corridor and whatever. So, yeah. So, I look at a slide like this and I see I-80, 680, 24, 242, Highway 4. It's all about freeways. And I realize this is just for identification purposes, but it's still, to me, it's like fingernails on a blackboard. It's like, isn't there some way we can describe this and sell it without making it freeway concentric? I don't know the answer, but I think that's the process I would like to see, is two measures out there, the good one and then the one that's going to pass, and try to find a way to bring them together so we'll get something that passes, but we'll get the best possible measure we can.
No.
So I'm going to make a couple of suggestions, but I want to go back to a higher level view. So if you really think about this, $100 million a year. Right now, the 19 cities in the county spend per year just on trying to maintain, not freeways or anything, just our local roads so you can get to the freeway or get to the bus stop, almost double that. So this is not transformative. If we had $300 billion, we would build and design the future. So it's important while we have lofty goals of things, the reality is this is a raindrop. And it's what Tom is just saying, there's two visions here. There's a vision of doing nothing but talking and setting and say, well, we got to move the pendulum. We can in little tiny ways, but if this measure is based on getting people on buses, all of our bus systems right now, other than long-haul routes, right? If you look deep, it's the long-haul routes are all the ones rising, which tells us that's what's wrong with our system. It's still getting people to not live and work in their communities, transporting them on a system that we are guilty of supporting is to getting people to go to San Francisco over these long distances or Santa Clara County. Are we going to continue to do that? Then put more money in there. But our local bus systems don't work. The ridership is dramatically falling on this because the concept, the way they're run, and I'm just going to be blunt, the way they're run and who they're trying to serve does not serve people. The long distance ones, home run. AC Transit's long distance runs, home runs. But the local systems are terrible. The paradigm has to change on that so dramatically. And as an example of that, on the traffics and the school bus systems and the system we've seen in Sacramento, some of the systems I just saw on this last trip and looking at transportation systems bus, the smaller buses that are custom designed on routing plans that are based on customers. So every year, for example, for our congestion relief local neighborhood buses, we find out where all the kids are going to be. We have a program that plots out where the best, most efficient routes would be, and we adjust. And we take 1.2 million car trips off the roads a year. That's transformative. Our buses, my condition is I'm not willing, nor are the residents in South County, willing to put more money on buses that have fewer and fewer and fewer people riding them, and we're getting rid of routes every day, but the cost of the system remains the same and is increasing above inflation. Doesn't make sense. You have South County, which is a little different, and here's 3 reasons why. 1, there's 5 cities, there's 3 of them are post-Prop 13 cities. So they got the short end of the stick on a tax system. They look like full cities. They don't get the same as everybody else. Some of you get twice as much in taxes, even though our residents pay the highest taxes per capita of anywhere in Contra Costa County. That money doesn't go to provide local services. The second thing is all of our residents know, and they remind us, they generate per capita more than double to 3 times what the county average is in sales tax generation. But we have always said, look, guys, we're going to play in this sandbox on a fair way. So we are doing division of all taxes, not based on that, who generates the money, purely based on per capita. So it means the people who are donating the most have 2 to 3 times the least. So we need those people and to find out what they want. And when you look at I-680 congestion relief, everybody in the San Ramon Valley is looking for a project that will make a difference. Bus on shoulder, we need to try that. It's not going to solve. It's not going to make our traffic levels alone, just based on population growth. Before we even get it built, the growth will be so high, it may not even have room to succeed, just because of the accident rates are going to go up exponentially. Accident rate goes up, bus and shoulder goes away. So we have to find, and we listed somewhere on there, I've said if we could do auxiliary lanes in the San Ramon Valley from where they end at Diablo going to Walnut Creek, that would make a huge difference. But I've also told we don't have the right of way. So are we listing that as a project and we can't do it? We can do it maybe in part of it. We need to be really clear on that. So that's sort of high-level, moan-groan reality check. I think what we're proposing here is the right concept. I think the return to source is serious, and I suggest we raise it 2.8%. The reason why is that gets it to, it's 15.2. It takes that away as an issue, and think about this, and going forward, as we go out in time, 30 years seems like a long time. Look what we've done in the past 30 years. We as an agency have done more things. More things than most other agencies around that are very quantifiable. But we haven't. East County and Caldecott Tunnel, to be honest, are the only two places we've made a dent. And we made a good dent. Caldecott Tunnel helped relieve it. Unfortunately, now the traffic levels are up so high, it would have been zero. It would have been F level of service had that tunnel not been there now. But we're back to the same level of service before we had that tunnel. East County is no question. The Eat Bart extension, that needs to get out there. We need to get that all the way out to Brentwood. That's not going to help anybody else in the rest of the county. If we need them to do this, they've told us clearly what they want. So give them something that helps them. Their circumstances are different. They are donors. Their tax base is different. People there are screaming at us. I have a neighbor who, and because of Prop 13 helps me, I paid 6 times what the previous person did. My neighbor with 2 little kids is paying $24,000 a year in property taxes. And right now, with the Trump initiative, that's not tax deductible. And they are worried they can't afford to stay there because they had expected to be able to do the math. So we want them to vote for this. There's nothing in this right now that will get South County unless we can make some changes. So I ask, give one thing, get those people on board, listen to a couple of suggestions, like to hear from staff. Do we have all the right-of-ways? Can we show that? We can sell that there. We can sell that. It'll help accidents. And we saw between Crow Canyon and Sycamore Valley had one of the highest accident rates on 680. The auxiliary lanes eliminated that. Just pure statistics. It's amazing what it did. So now our worst accident rate is between Walnut Creek and where those lanes stop. So if we can get that, put the 2.8%, make the adjustments, I think you're going to have a way that all of us, because we're the ones that have to go out and sell this in South County.
All right. Karen.
Thank you. I still get confused between 1.1 and 1.3, folks, because it seems 1.3 is part of the answers that you're looking for, but I'll go forward. No, stay with where you were, please. Okay. I agree with Kevin. I like those 4 things. I was looking for the bike, and I see it here, and it's just too hard to find a whole bunch of stuff. So it's a lot of work, I know, but I agree with what Kevin was saying is each geographic area. Now, and as Dave Campbell said, you know, you can call a rose by another name, but it's still a rose. Congestion relief is what it is. Now, signature, come up with a fancy name for it, fine, but I like putting all of the things that help each of those there. And I'm sorry, if you will go back to this other slide, which were the questions, because there you go. I'm fine with the 15% on the return to source. I agree with Kevin if we can get the total funding commitment on alternative up farther. I will comment, I love hearing statistics. I love hearing surveys. Dave and I sit on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. I cannot tell you how many times we try to get out to our communities, grant dollars to reduce diesel in trucks and rail. We are doing, we meaning the staff and all of the citizens of the Bay Area are doing a fabulous job reducing pollution. It is better. Our air is better today than it was 25 years ago. People can argue with me. There's a picture on Facebook that shows Washington, D.C. in a real clear capital and a real smoggy capital. I don't know what they're doing back there, but I do know what we're doing out here. And when we talk about transformative, every city I know of is putting in electrical vehicle chargers. I like what Randy said. We have to keep those incentives coming. I'm looking to purchase either a PHEV or an electric car, and I got to know that I'm going to get some sort of incentive for it because they're expensive. And if we want people to be transformative, we need them to be driving different kind of vehicles. Now, going back to the survey, I agree. We're all concerned, especially elected officials. We hear it all the time about climate change. We hear it from our constituents. But if you ask each of those constituents to a person, are you willing to get out of your car? The answer is no. It's just not there, folks. And I agree with what Newell was saying. We need to look at, and this, I sat on County Connection. I know our bus services do fabulous jobs with the resources they have, but we need to be putting more money into those short, and somebody said, inside the neighborhoods and the communities. So that's why I'm supportive of the higher funding for transportation. Signature projects, again, I'm going to leave that to staff to come up, or the marketers. The BART stuff, 10 years out. And I know we haven't heard from Deborah. Deborah's doing a fabulous job. I really want to give her public acknowledgement for all she's doing on this. But she alone can't get us the timing and the change in order to do that. And for the planning and administration, 3 and 1 is fine with me.
Deborah, you want to say something?
It's going to be short because I can't talk very well.
That's because you haven't used your voice so much you bored me.
No, it's because I've been sick. But thanks for the help there. We're happy to see what has been included here. The DMU additional DMU cars for the Antioch line are really important to that area. I've just received an email this morning from someone telling me about how at 5 in the morning, before the station opens in Antioch, that there are people lined up, even sometimes out into the street. They are waiting for the station to open, and there's just not enough cars. Everything is crowded, and we could be carrying a lot more capacity there. With respect to the rail cars, the funding of the new rail cars, while I would love to say we really want you to fund those now, I don't think it's unrealistic, the plan that's been put forth, to take a look at it in 10 years and provide that funding at that time. We do have train control. The computer-based train control system is going to be required to be in place and up and running before we can actually utilize those new cars. So I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, I'd really like to say 8 years, but I think you're doing what you can for us. $100 million for the station modernization and safety, cleanliness. I'm sorry, did it say modernization? Is that the way you're terming it now? So that's also important. I've been focused on trying to get some improvements at Concord and trying to move the modernization of the Concord station up on the list. We have modernization going on at Walnut Creek. In the next 1 to 2 years that will start. We have El Cerrito underway now. So these station modernizations are going to include some of the improvements I'm after, which is the fare gate improvement, better control of the fare evasion. And I'm hopeful that some of that money in that category will go to the station hardening that I'm after, which ultimately is full fare gate replacement, not some of the fixes that we're doing now. So overall, I'm happy with it. Of course, we'd always like to see more, but I think that there have been plenty of conversations without me, and I'm gonna let it go the way it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Hudson.
Yeah, I don't want to say I disagree with you, Tom, but we're going to have to put more than 5 cents into the freeways. I like the idea Newell's presenting simply because people see work on the freeway now. If nothing else, they can believe something will be done. And if we don't, I'll never make a mayor's conference meeting on time. It's just impossible going through there. That's one person telling you a reality check from others that do it every day. It's difficult to get through that section. The numbers on transit he's talking about can be supported at every operation meeting we have. The difference is that I think the people that we have working on it have a plan if we can get them the funding, and that's kind of what we're talking about with this plan. Even if it's mobility on demand or MOS or some of the things we've been talking about, or how we get out these trips in other ways. We just hired somebody for the link, but we've got 3 people from our county connection here. They could speak to it if they wish, and I have a feeling they will be at future meetings. But the money has to go in that direction if you want to improve it, because it's not going to come from a different source. And you need to upgrade these buses. You need to do things like what we're doing in Walnut Creek with the electric bus. And they're going to need charging units. They're going to need all of these upgrades and things that we're talking about. And that all is part of the innovation that we're talking about. The big one is going to be what Newell mentioned with the return to source. My RTPC thinks 18's bare minimum. I don't know how we can do all of the things that we're talking about, or if we're 1/3 of the votes or we don't have the votes, if we can do it. So my proposal is going to be, before we waste everybody's time here, I think the earliest we can have a meeting is Monday. I'll be out of town, out of the country till Friday, but we better come together and say, look, Danville, San Ramon, and we've said this before, looking back and forth with the eye contact, if we're not going to get on board and make this thing happen, we have the heaviest lift in this next election. We need to make this happen. So what's it going to be? Are we going to stand on 18 to 24 as the make it or break it? Because I think most people here can find something else to do on Wednesday night if that's where we're going to leave it.
Amy?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I obviously we've been thinking about a lot of this for the last years, and dreaming about it and thinking about it and worrying about it. And, having been closely involved with Measure X, I've spent a lot of time figuring out how could we be successful the next time? What do we need to do to get the 2/3 vote? How is this measure going to be more like J in terms of both the expenditure plan as well as the enthusiasm to get it past, the hunger by this board, by the advocacy groups to get this funded? And I think it goes back to the expenditure plan. And I think that the challenge that this expenditure plan, has been this draft has been very carefully crafted to look at what the voters say. So to give you an example, 680 is a critical corridor for our county. So is Highway 4, so is Highway 80. And so what I'm hearing and what I'm concerned about is this balance between local streets and roads and these regional investments that we make in our county is how do we address the issue of congestion? And I'm sorry, but local return to source is not focused on congestion. And what our voters are saying in every single one of the regions is that they want congestion relief. But what they're saying is that they want congestion relief in a different way. We have widened all the freeways. We've done that, and we've seen significant improvements. But the next phase for us in Contra Costa County, the reason that 680 is so important is the ability to have a seamless express network. So when you talk about highway investment in this program, it's tied to getting those corridors so we can put express buses on that freeway, on 680. And when Karen talked about my reference of untying the knot, that's getting that northbound HOV lane through Walnut Creek. Right now we have public-private partnership with Bishop Ranch, where they help subsidize the County Connection bus from BART to Bishop Ranch. We need those corridors north and south to be working. And that's what we're really talking about with our highway investment. It's getting a corridor so Express Lane can do this. And I can tell you that the 680 Express Lane network is one of the highest priorities in the Bay Area. And as chair of the Bay Area Toll Oversight Committee, I can tell you this, that is a priority. It was the first place we put regional express lane money. We're going to continue to do that, and we want to finish that project. You know, I also think that transit in this county works. I think that what we've done in the last 6 months, for example, serving on the County Connection Board, is we've taken a look at routes, and we have a challenge because we serve Lifeline residents who rely on transit, then we serve the last mile, and we also serve the commuters, the Trans-Bay commuters, the long-distance commuters, whether they're going to Walnut Creek to Bishop Ranch or Pinole to San Francisco, Richmond to San Francisco, and then with County Connection, the last mile from home to BART. So, again, I appreciate the fact that we're at the point where everybody's, struggling to put their particular thing in the measure. I think in the end, we need to look at the goal of getting this measure passed. And frankly, that's why I think that the strategic investments that are identified in this plan really create a very different funding program than the last measure. And I think it's really a significant improvement. But I'm worried if we start significantly changing, for example, if you start to increase one category, you have to start cutting something else out. And I think, again, these investments, we went through the exercise at SWAT the other day talking about, well, if you increased money for one category, what would you be willing to cut? And, I think our Loma Linda cities were not willing to cut these programs. So, again, I appreciate the fact that we're going to have more time to talk about this. But again, when the voters are telling us they want congestion relief, when our advocacy community is telling us they want equity, they want, environmental protections, we've got bike ped, I just think that this plan, I think, would be a plan that we could pass in terms of voter support.
Janet?
Yeah, thank you. I'm from West County, and in West County, we have a profile that's a little bit different than anyone else's. And getting back to what Tom was saying and the kind of world he wants to create for his grandchildren, and that's kind of what we were, I think, trying to do when we came up with our list. And the more I think about our list, the more I personally like our list. And I have been a proponent for return to source for a long time. And so and in my city, we actually have a whole half-cent sales tax dedicated to local streets and roads. So we take it as seriously as anyone else takes it, I think you could say. But I think it's time in our area for us to move on from return to source to getting people around. And we don't talk about getting them around in one way. We talk about a multitude of places that people want to go. Not only do people want to go to San Francisco from our area, they want to go to Oakland, they want to go to Emeryville, and they want to move around West County. And we have a lot of bus service operating on West County, and I happen to ride it, and I happen to find myself in a crowded situation a lot, including today and several times when I was on the system. And so to say that the system is, just coming apart or something, reducing service, it just seems absurd when you can't even hardly get on the bus because it's so crowded. And so I think what it brings me back to is what I think I've actually said when we were working on other measures, which is we're all different. And I wish, I wish everyone was like we are in West County, and I think every region feels the same about their region. But I think if we're going to get the South County voters, we're going to have a measure that in some way appeals to what it is they feel they're lacking. Same for West County, same for every other region. So I think it just, to me, brings back the point that we need to have it set up so that every region has something that appeals to their voters. And we in West County, I think, have pretty well defined what we think it is for our voters. And the more I think about our what we said, which was return to source would be down to 15%, for example. I think that's the way to go, and I hope that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Don, okay, go. No.
Well, this has been a really good discussion, and Janet's exactly right. This discussion shows the differences around the county and the different needs. And I think there's an important aspect that would be better served by this sort of a regional focus and maybe a corridor-oriented focus on how we present the projects and programs. But I'm also thinking that there are a lot of folks who just like we don't want to have our residents search for everything that applies to, in my case, Central County on this long list. We also don't want the transit folks to have to search through every county to find what fits what they're concerned about. I don't want the trails people having to search through every list to try to find out where bike improvements are being made, for instance. So maybe there need to be parallel lists that come up with the same list of projects, but they're organized a little differently to suit what is important to each group. And maybe we do something like we did last time with Measure J to organize by region, and we give, here are the things that are important to you. Here is how much we're putting into transit. Here's how much we're putting into trails. Here's how much we're doing to that. But the overall county can also be split kind of that way. And I know it's a lot of work to have a couple of different spreadsheets, but not everyone understands a program the same way. And so it might be helpful to be able to illustrate it more than one way. I know that's a challenge for marketing, but I think we can figure that out. And it might be pie charts. That might be the simplest way to show it, or something that's really visual. I shared this particular spreadsheet with my council last night, and they said, did you bring the magnifying glass to go around? And I gave it to them in 11 by 17. But they said, wow, this is a lot of detail. And a couple of them didn't even bother to read it because it was too detailed. Now, my accountant, who's, by trade, he thought this was fabulous. But so I think that's important. I think personally, I am so grateful that we have SB1. We have the increased gas tax, which is helping us a good bit. We have our current Measure J. I think there comes a point where we can't be too greedy. And yes, there will always be potholes to fill, but on that list of priorities, potholes were number 5. They weren't number 1. Congestion was number 1. And I think if we can show people how we're addressing that and adding 15% return to source on top of the 18 that we've got now, I think that's significant dollars. And when you add that to SB1 money and you add it to all the other sources we've got, you know what? We're so far ahead of many areas of the state. I think we can't be too greedy. We need to address the congestion issues. I also think we're on the right track with getting over 50%. What exactly the number is, I don't know, and it may be that it varies by region. I agree, Tom. You know, maybe West County wants to put 75 in, and if we put 55 in the rest of the areas, maybe we wind up somewhere in the mid-60s overall for transit. And that means doing transit differently. That means the express buses that can actually run on routes that go from one end of the county to the other. Because without that, they're just stuck in traffic. It's sort of like, you know, the way we've been doing it all along. If they're stuck in the same traffic, there's no point in riding a bus. But if you can actually get there in a reasonable amount of time, people might actually do it. The other thing, and I was actually talking to my dentist today in the chair while I was waiting to get numb, and she wanted to understand a little bit more about the work that I do. She's a transplant from the East Coast, and she didn't understand how come we don't have school buses. So I was giving her a little of that history. And she says, school buses would make so much difference. And I said, well, yeah, but in a big district like Mount Diablo, you got people that go across areas. And I said, but on the other hand, if you could do like what Tri-Delta is doing right now for the BART station and focus on maybe a 2-mile circumference that would be direct shuttles loading people in to the various schools, kind of an on-demand type model, and figure out how to do that. We got to think outside what boxes we've been. We can't think same yellow school bus like we all grew up with. But we do need to think about how we move people around and how do we make it. And I asked her, I said, would you put your kindergartner on one of those school buses? If it was a shuttle that just served, you know, the Clayton neighborhoods going to Clayton schools? She said, absolutely. That's really good for socialization and for people learning how to get along with other people and all those things that they don't get when the helicopter parents drop them off. You know, learning how to deal with the 6th graders at the same time. You know, those kinds of things are important social skills that our kids need to learn. And because they're not learning them, maybe that's part of the reason the adults aren't riding the buses either, because they haven't figured out how to do that. But if we start small, localized, maybe that's an idea. I don't know all the details how to work that out, but I think we need to start working on it. Because I really do think that's more like an on-demand type thing, like what Tri-Delta is working on for the BART station out there. And I think that could make a big difference. And we all know what a difference school traffic makes in the morning commute. It's just outrageous. So those are some of the things we need to think about for this alternative transportation modes, as well as getting the bikeways and, you know, just the safe routes to school for kids, filling the gap closures in the sidewalks so that kids are actually safe to walk to school. Those kinds of things are important. The strategy for the signature projects and the categories, I think that's really, really important. And, you know, I think we need to call it by category, by corridor, not saying we're fixing 680 as a highway, but we're fixing the 680 corridor so transit works. And we got to figure out a way to describe that. We've got creative minds working on this. They need to do that. I want to wait the 10 years to see if the train control system really gets there. I'm sorry. It's been delayed too many times in my career here, and I'll believe it when I see it. So, and I like the idea of a 10-year review. I really think that makes sense. Considering technology, we don't know where technology is going to be 10 years from now. I think it's really important that we look at it then. And I'm absolutely in favor of the 3%. Planning properly And planning as a county-wide effort can't be done on a shoestring. It's got to be done comprehensively. And we've got to be able to think outside the box and do things right. And if that means that we have to spend 3% on it, then that's what we do.
Pretty much, we've gone around, no, we didn't. Glover,
Not quite.
we almost went around the horn.
Thank you. Julie, I echo many of the things that you just stated. I think that the signature projects are going to be important for each of the regions. And I think that we identify under those signature projects the other projects that we're looking at within those regions. And that gets to what Kevin was talking about earlier, being able to identify. Someone wants to know, well, what's in it for me? They'll be able to identify the signature project and then all the others, whether it's bike lanes, whether it's we're talking about buses or whatever we're talking about, we could be able to identify each of those items within that. But under the signature project that most people are going to be looking at initially, what's in it for me? What's the big bite of the apple for my particular region? I think the other thing that's important is I'm all for express buses. I think they work great, but we need to be working with our smaller operators up in the communities where they operate to get folks to transit system that's in the community. How are we going to get people to those particular sites? So we need to work with our small operators and be able to get them to transit sites going in and out of the various communities to make that happen. So, when you look at return to source, as stated, there's a number of dollars that's there now with the 18% that's continues to be there. I'm from local government. I was on city council. I understand what they're saying, but I also understand the importance of being able to make a bigger difference. And I think that the 15% is a good number in going forward. And I think that we have to engage those city managers and show them the bigger picture. I think the other thing that's important is that identifying how the dollars through SB1 and the other measures that have been out there, how important they play a role in engaging local communities and the dollars that are being spent in those communities with those particular dollars. I think that's as important. But again, I think signature projects, identifying the smaller project, working with our small operators and getting people to transit systems is going to be key and very important. And I'm fine with the planning and administration funds.
Okay, we just went, no, okay.
I think I am the last one, so you can, not quit watching the lights. As I wanted to thank Karen Stepper, who's now left, but for coming to talk about the discussion that we had at SWAT, and then also the La Miranda cities met yesterday to go over all of this. And so one of the items, and then I'll come to those and where I stand on those, but was talking about making sure that we can talk to our constituents, our residents, about the dollars that are allocated by subregion coming back into our subregion and not being competitive at that level, not having us have to compete against all the rest of the county on a formula base and all of that. So wanted to make sure, and I know I spoke with Don Tatson, and I believe that that is the way that it's laid out. And so, but I wanted to make sure that we voiced that. The 15%, I personally support, and the La Miranda cities through the LPMC supported that as well. We did spend a lot of time on SWAT, and we are going to meet again on July 8th to try to come to, agreement on that and how that works. The total funding, absolutely support at the 50%, and I agree with with Tom, Commissioner from Richmond, that we it would be great to be going really bold and in a different direction, but we want to make sure that this gets, I know David's making faces at me, but I support the 50% and support making sure, as Julie said, and I'm sure I'm supposed to be saying Commissioner Pierce or something, but supporting that we make sure that people know how this is going to benefit in terms of pedestrian bikeways. We had a lot of discussion yesterday about projects where we could get in the weeds on the complete streets and all of that, but we'll wait until the measure passes. The strategy for signature projects, I very much support that, so people don't have to look around and find it. We want to keep our messaging straightforward and simple, and those projects that do address congestion relief also benefit our city and cities in terms of taking congestion off of through traffic, coming off when 680 and 24 don't work. And then the consideration of funding for new BART cars in 10 years. I will say that there was some discussion and some support for having a 5-year review of the overall plan rather than a 10-year, but we'll support 10 years and looking at the new funding for BART cars. And then I have heard Tim Hale explain the planning and administration fees, and Nishan, I think, 2 or 3 times, and so very much support the funding on the 3-in-1.
Thank you. Julie, you had one comment.
I do. It was brought up in the staff report on the SWAT request to have a match from the other region for the Caldecott tunnel work, and Transpac totally agreed with that. So we're totally fine with that idea.
And Newell had one comment.
Yeah, I just want to add on. Julie had mentioned it. The traffics program that we did in San Ramon Valley is hugely successful. So we got waiting lists. So this is that customized routing system that goes. I believe in buses, but I don't believe the model of how most of our operators are doing it, other than their long haul routes. And there's all the data shows that. I would say you want to get the San Ramon Valley SWAT and all of us to agree is this first line item here, $230 million, that we all compete to use that. Each region gets to compete with the existing bus operators to come up with the best plan and the best solution for customized bus service. We'd hit a home run. Because I tell you what, we run a system that is lean, all organized labor. We're not cutting corners on anything, but it's one of the most cost-effective delivery systems around. And it takes 1.2 million cars off the road in our communities. That's important. The last thing I'll say is on this return to source. If you want to get San Ramon, give the things to that. The difference between 2.8 just in SWAT over 30 years is $19 million. It's a raindrop compared to $3 billion. You want to solve it, make an adjustment in the SWAT area. All the other 3 reasons are fine. Take them out of the equation. Say, okay, we'll agree. You get 18%. It's only $19 million because, remember, those are the donors that are donating 2.5 to 3 times the sales tax that you're all using, because you're getting it on per capita, not based on per capita spending. Give them the $19 million. It's a few $100,000 out of each pot. You wouldn't even know it. Had it been, you could just by rounding make that work. That's a solution that would take them on. If that's what they're asking for, we give it to them, move on. And it's not changing a $3 billion plan in any way.
Okay. You got me.
Just to follow up on Julie's and Newell's comments on what Tri-Delta is doing. Maybe you haven't all heard. What we've done is we've geofenced 2 neighborhoods, one in Antioch, one in Pittsburgh. Right. We have a phone app where you can have we have shuttle buses, carry 12 people. They come to your front doorstep, take you from your doorstep to BART or one of the other key locations that have been identified as this process. This is just a trial we started just this week. The rest of you should be paying attention to what we're doing and how this works, because this may be the future of what bus service turns into, rather than having specific locations where you're picking up 1 or 2 people. We go smaller buses, and we're filling up those smaller buses, and we're getting people where they need to be, filling that first and last mile.
All right.
That's why the investment in small operators.
All right. First of all, I want to thank everyone that's sitting out there. Listening to this. Let's make sure you're awake You know, wave an arm, wave your cell phone, you know. But the idea is that, you know, tonight we've really narrowed things down, and so we really appreciate your tolerance and your patience.
That's only the first item.
But I would say we're going to have a few more meetings, but I would like to ask, Don, you guys got an earful tonight?
Well, it's been very helpful. I think we have enough guidance on the expenditure plan portion of this to continue. I would point out to all of you that in Measure X, I think it was TransPac had a supplemental return to source contribution. So I think the average was, or maybe it was Measure J, I don't know, it was one of them. Measure X, okay, yes. So there was a 23%, and I think one of the subregions had an additional amount. They still had to take it out of their regional allocation. So if you're going to take 2.8% out of swap money and put it into return to source funds, you just need to figure out where you're going to take it from.
That wasn't the suggestion.
Okay, well, I understand, but that's another alternative.
I think several of the regions actually did that. We sort of,
Okay,
one at a
right.
time, caught on to how to do
Yeah.
that and
So I'm
take
just
that
saying that
extra
that
couple
option still
percent.
exists. You know, some cities, if it were SWAT that did that, might say, well, gee, we'll put that money into our school bus program. That's something.
Well, the idea is I think we've given you.
Right, I think you've given us a lot. Well, what I would suggest, we do have 1.2. We have a few things we'd like to talk about in the policies.
Okay, and let's move on to that.
Okay, do you want to take a quick break or?
No.
Okay.
No.
Get back together. Keep
What?
rolling.
Yeah,
All right, I'll be quick. Okay,
Yeah.
get me to 1.2.
There might be a few people who will leave, but that's all right. We'll need to get it done. Exactly.
While he's getting that up, Chair Taylor, I'd just like to say Dave Campbell said he doesn't want to be back here for a third one. He won't be. There won't be a third shot at this.
It's a good point. Gotta get it done.
Okay, we're ready?
All right, let me discuss policies briefly. So recall at the last meeting, we said that in the 2016 proposal, there were 4 categories of policies. We're proposing those plus 3 additions, and what I want to do tonight is just go over the major changes. Starting with the taxpayer safeguards and accountability. The first is that what's listed here, and I'm not going to read through it, is the way that we had defined accountability in prior measures, and it was sort of like we were accountants. And we were going to turn everything we did over to other accountants, and they're going to be able to tell the public that we spent the money fairly. If you go back to our last discussion of the expenditure plan, what the voters are telling us is that what they want us to be accountable also is that what we spend the money on produces results. And having books that clear doesn't alone do that. So we're going to propose some additional things. So one is this periodic review of the expenditure plan we talked about, whether it's every 10 years or every 15 years we can work out, and whether BART's ready in 10 years or 15 years, we'll just see. I think BART being ready is more of an event-driven item as opposed to a time-driven item. What we would want to do is look at the strategic delivery plan, do periodic reviews of the expenditure plan. One of the areas we're going to propose is that if there's clearly excess funds, and we know it before the measure is close to running out, that historically we had allocated those funds to the region in which they were generated, typically from leverage. The difference we're proposing here is that if the region got its project or program implemented and the authority was able to leverage that and get more funds, the authority decides where to spend it, and you spend it on the best project that exists. Hopefully you'll think about regional equity if there's a whole lot of money.
Don, just to be clear, as the one who ended up donating money,
right?
You would just take the incentive away.
So-
I could have used those millions of dollars on another project. We chose to do that. Don't disincentivize.
So I guess what I'm saying is we're doing it only when there's clearly excess funds. In the allocations, we're not talking about changing the regional allocations as a result of this. So you'd still get money for what's in the plan. But if Randy and Tim and Ross and Peter and Martin are successful in bringing in another $1 billion, and it all happened to be in Transpac, we don't necessarily want to spend that $1 billion in Transpac. And so we're going to propose giving you some flexibility. If you tell us not to, we won't. And then the local contracting and jobs is still under review. The other thing we're going to do is there's a provision in Measure X for performance-based reviews of any activity over 25 million. We may want to propose reducing that a bit, expanding the number of things that are evaluated, and maybe setting stronger guidelines for what a project has to do in order to be funded. It's not an effort to take money out of a region. If a project that's proposed doesn't meet the guidelines, then it's either modified or that region comes up with a different project. We have not had time to put into the draft you received earlier the requirements that the various recipients of the funds needed to achieve in order to get their funds. There are a lot. They vary by category. So, for example, the transit policy talks about development of an integrated transit plan among the operators before those monies are released. We have requirements for BART to get the station hardening or fare gate replacement things. So for affordable and safe transportation, we're already working on an accessible transportation strategic service plan that's underway. The idea is this would be contingent upon that. Safe transportation for youth, the decision of the authority at last week's meeting was each region ought to develop its own plan, because what works in SWAT is not what WCTAC has proposed, but what works in WCTAC may be really the better plan for WCTAC. We already have local reporting requirements for fixing and modernizing local roads. And the funding requirements just go on. A lot of these we still have to develop detailed policies for. And Measure BB sort of had that same approach. They sort of said, here are categories. One of the things we'll do once it passes is develop the detailed policies in a public process. So I'm not going to go through the rest of those. The next category you have in front of you is a transit policy, and there are several goals here. These have not changed really from the last meeting. What has changed, and I ask you to look at it, is we're putting together a transit first component, which involves not only the transit operators, but essentially suggestions to the jurisdictions to do things with their roadways to make them more transit friendly. So in my naive way, I would categorize it as complete streets for buses. Yeah, and you've got a handout of the draft, and we've received comments from the transit operators, and we're pretty confident we can accommodate all their requests, but hopefully we're going to hear from the jurisdictions and citizens as well.
Noble idea, but think about this, that the future probably is just as Kevin was talking about, and we found in San Ramon Valley. It's not going to be a bus delivery system of what we currently have. It's going to be something different. That, as you read it, if I were the planner trying to plan it, I'm going to do my arterial streets, they're all going to look like, I don't think that what our bus system is going to look like to work as well as it should. So I would be careful.
Well, that's why we're looking for comments.
Yeah, that detail. It's the right concept, but the fact is it's going to change.
Right.
And it's going to change over time dramatically if we are headed the direction that we think is a likely solution, which is going to vary year to year based on demand and who it is. I mean, for example, in Danville has one of the largest park and rides, and it's going to be it's being expanded. It's going to add 50%. If they could add 5 times as much, it'd be full because the buses are lined up there. And by the way, none of them are public buses. They're all the private companies. And people are desperate. So if we could do a bus system so people don't have to drive, we could triple the capacity of those number of buses coming in there and heading them out.
And that's great. And what I'm trying to do is highlight that we've modified this to put a transit first component in it. We want comment, please. I appreciate that comment. because what we have may not be what it eventually becomes to be or may get taken out. And then finally, we introduced the concept of a Vision Zero policy. Again, you have that as a handout. What we're trying to do is eliminate traffic-related severe injuries and fatalities, equitably invest in traffic safety improvements, et cetera. And there's an outline, there's that. And again, just as with the transit policy, we welcome comments. One of the thoughts we've had is that this may almost become an overarching concept looking over the transit policy as well as complete streets policies, et cetera. And then there are these policies, which I will not talk about anymore because they have had no or minor changes since the last version. And so any comment or any direction you'd like to give us for what we put in
Go forth
the next
and write
version?
it up.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
It's your turn.
I would actually echo Karen's comment, but also say that I think putting these policies, especially the newer ones, into writing actually shows the accountability, the having the standards and things like that we're being a little bit more deliberate about shows the public that we're really serious about being careful with these dollars. And not everybody's going to read the fine print of the ballot, measure that we're going to print and publish to everybody. But those who do, I think, will be reassured that we've thought it through. And so I think these are really a good start. And so I'm looking forward to seeing future iterations.
We're on to 1.3 unless there are other comments or public comment.
1.3. We're going to finish around 9.
Finish when we're done.
Julie said not yet. We're
I don't
finished.
want to rush through this. I want to do it right.
Now you're going to lose your audience or you're losing your people. Oh, yeah, you are. Get ready.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tim Hale, Deputy Executive Director for Projects. So I'm here to present 1.3, and this is to discuss the initial draft transportation expenditure plan. I'll be short. You do have a handout in front of you of the current draft of the initial transportation expenditure plan, and I wanted to review just a few of the basic changes that happened since the last time you've seen this document. We did hand it out at the last board meeting. We did include it in the packet, so that way everyone would have some opportunity to review in advance. This is another version that we're trying to put in front of you. I guess the real clear picture here is we are, as Don was saying, we're looking for your input. So if you can provide any input possibly into the draft expenditure plan and the TEP, please do so either as part of this item or via in writing, email, or phone. But the item, some of the big changes that happen is.
No, I would just comment, since we're not meeting again for 3 weeks, this is our homework, folks. If you were normally we're going to meet next Wednesday, mark the time off and do that, because I think that's how you're going to get remarks or comment.
So some of the major updates since last time you've seen it, we did revise the improved traffic flow on local streets to improve traffic flow on major local streets, and we just fixed some various things in the document in terms of consistency and maps, et cetera. But probably the big change in the document is kind of alluding to what we're building off what we talked about in 1.2 is the funding requirements. So the way we kind of structured the document is there's little blurbs in various funding categories that have specific funding requirements, and then that is then referred back to the Taxpayer Association or Taxpayer Safeguards and Accountability policy where those specific funding requirements are outlined, and so that'll be provided in a future draft as well. And that's all I have for that item, and then I can move on to the next item. But I'm just looking for input on the current draft.
I have a question. It came up at my council meeting last night because one of my council members actually printed this off and looked at it, and he wants to know what language the TBD is in. He says, is that Pidgin English? Is it Latin? What is that gibberish in there?
It's called something. It's some Lorem Ipsum.
So it's not really a language at all. It's truly gibberish.
Yeah, it's fake. It's fake
Okay.
text. It's fake
Okay.
text.
The question was asked and I didn't have an answer.
So any input, and then
You're on.
all right. So on
If I
1.4,
could just confirm there's no public comment on 1.3?
Is there any comments on 1.3? Moving on.
all right. So this is 1.4. So we started out on this journey together about 3 weeks ago, and we all approved a tentative schedule to approve an initial draft transportation expenditure plan actually on June 19th. But actually, given now where we're at today, we're still receiving input, we're still revising and building on the draft, and so so there's two directions we can go here. One is we can continue meeting and actually discuss this as a whole community of the board, or the board also could delegate authority to an ad hoc committee. And this would be different than the ad hoc committee that was previously formed. This would be a new ad hoc committee to be able to work with staff to make sure that the input that we're receiving today and in the future, to incorporate that into the draft and authorize it to release to public and stakeholder review on behalf of the authority board. And so our overall schedule that we currently have is that we were holding a special authority board meeting on July 17th to review any input from the public or stakeholders. And this is assuming that the authority board would release a initial draft TEP prior to or just thereafter 4th of July. And so we would have another special authority board meeting on July 17th to review any input, potential changes. And it's also coincides with our normal third regular meeting in July. Then we would continue on and propose another August 7th meeting. This is per the schedule that we approved in June 5th on August 7th to receive all of the input that we received today based on the public outreach and stakeholder input. And then we would continue to have those weekly meetings in August and approve a draft TEP in August for circulation to the towns and cities for resolutions to support, as well as the county. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of summary. I'm not going to go through the rest of these deadlines, but this is the schedule that we've kind of committed to on June 5th. And so basically, if staff is looking for recommendation, do we want to schedule another meeting, or does the board want to delegate that authority to the ad hoc committee to release an authorization for to draft TEP to the public?
My comments to the board, when we first started this, it was my impression that the board wanted to be on the whole thing.
Then I would suggest we meet next week on the 26th. But we have to, I don't know if that's doable, though, because you've been given a lot of information
Right.
tonight, and I don't know that you can write it up that fast. That's not fair. So maybe it is the 17th, and we'll just have to live with that. Because, I mean, I'm available July 3rd, but I don't know that a lot of people want to come July 3rd.
So
I'm
we
available
can
by
also,
phone.
we do have a tentative special authority meeting on July 10th. We
Yeah.
can hold it on July 10th as well. After planning committee.
That would be, to
The
me,
planning
that-
committee will be quick, I guarantee you.
Okay.
Okay, so they'll do
How
it,
about
we'll do the
10th?
10th and the 17th.
Okay. So are we on for the 10th and the 17th? Is that what we're coming down with?
Yeah, currently based on the schedule that was approved on June 5th is the 10th and the 17th.
So, and then the follow-up to that would mean, that would imply for Lindsay's purposes, you don't want us to start the community outreach before the meeting on the 10th.
I don't think we can wait that long.
Well, that's the conundrum.
I'm really concerned we can't wait that
Right.
long for the cities to start reviewing it.
Well, it's her outreach is much more to community groups than it is to cities. The cities, we know how to reach through the RTPCs,
Yeah.
and they are engaged. This is the town halls,
So we're talking about incorporating the comments into the spreadsheet and updating this document.
right, for the policies.
And get that out to the public, even if it's got some TBD and whatever language that is. in there to comment on. No, it'll have those cleaned up by then.
Right.
I think we need to get it out there and start getting comments back.
So-
I mean, most of our public speakers today said they appreciated the outreach. They thought we needed to do the engagement. We got to have something for them to look at.
So in that case, I think what we would recommend is that in addition to the meeting on the 10th, you authorize the chair to appoint an ad hoc committee we could run that version by before we send it out to the public, right?
Well, no, what I was thinking is one person from each RTPC and then federal or I'll do it. That's 5 people.
At the direction of the chair.
All right.
Yep.
Is that your direction? That's my direction.
Well, it seems that people can meet on July 3rd, so maybe we do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Should we hold that, Mr. Chair?
sure. What do you think? I think we should do that.
Mal, are you clear on the action in terms of?
It sounds like it's a new ad hoc committee. I just want to confirm the existing ad hoc committee will not have this task because we can't have them potentially blend and create a quorum. So it'll be this new ad hoc committee.
It might be the same people, but it would be with a new task.
That could add that task to the same ad hoc committee. That's fine as well.
All right.
6 o'clock here on the 3rd, or do you want to turn the day?
Let's work on that with staff. We don't need to set that right this second. True.
Okay. You got it.
We might do it next week.
We could do that.
And then maybe we could just take public comment if there is any.
All right. Public comments. Is there any public comments? Okay, we made some decisions. Okay. Are we, any more? We done, Karen? Everybody?
I think we're good.
Are we good? Can we-
Great job, staff. You
Can-
guys are knocking it out of the park.
Can we adjourn? We adjourn.
Do whatever you want, Bob.
We're adjourning. I had so much crap to